Thank you, Speaker. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak on the Marriage Amendment Definition and Religious Freedoms Bill 2017 that we have before us in the House today. This moment has been a long time coming, and I'm so pleased and proud that time is now here to deliver marriage equality to all Australians. As a number of members have already said in this place, particularly the member for Gellibrand, there is a considerable level of frustration at the fact that all of us here in this chamber are presenting speeches on this issue, but it's very important for me to explain why it is that I am making my contribution here today. In my home state of Tasmania, 8 of 10 eligible voters took part in the Marriage Equality Postal Survey, with 63.6% of them indicating their support for changing the law to allow same-sex couples to marry. Tasmania has a transformative history with respect to LGBTI rights, and it is heartening that a majority of Tasmanians are today supportive of marriage equality. Tasmania has experienced a significant shift in social and political attitudes ahead of national trends since that time. Many played their part, but I would like to in particular recognise Rodney Croome for his dignified, reasoned and principled activism over decades. Firstly, with respect to removing criminal sanctions against members of the gay community, and then subsequently and progressively addressing issues of discrimination, culminating, of course, in this debate. I'm thrilled that every electorate in Tasmania returned a majority yes vote. I am, however, acutely conscious that the result for many in the LGBTI community involved very significant stress, anxiety and indeed questioning of their very identity and self-worth. I'm very sorry that this process was imposed upon this community. I cannot begin to understand what it would be like to have my feelings of self-worth, my sexuality or my identity questioned in the full glare of the political process, with the opportunity for prejudice and discrimination brought to the fore as part of the debate, despite every exhortation for reasoned and respectful debate. Nevertheless, given the fact of the survey and its sanctioning by the High Court, it was vitally important that those seeking marriage equality campaigned for a successful result. In my electorate of Bass, around 55,000 participants completed the postal survey, with 61.7% supporting a change in the law. My office played host to a Yes campaign official announcement party on the 15th of November. Members of the LGBTI community, their friends, allies and supporters gathered to watch the ABS deliver the result. The electorate office was bursting at the seams, with people spilling out onto the street waiting anxiously for the result to be announced. I must say, Speaker, that on this occasion it was an absolute pleasure to stand by and watch as history was being made. This was a time for those with a personal interest in the matter to speak out and have their voices heard. I personally felt that this was not a time for appropriation of the result by those without that vital personal interest. I'd like to recognise the efforts of everyone involved in the Yes campaign and give a special mention to the Bass volunteers. This was truly an issue that encouraged people to become politically motivated. I must also acknowledge Rick Martin, Mara Schneider and everyone else in Launceston who worked hard to push marriage equality forward over the years. In particular, Susie Clark, Super Grandma and tireless supporter, David Broughton, Master Letter Writer and Ray Mustogel, Business Leader. A big thank you also to the team from Party in the Paddock and Lucy Productions for getting enrolments together in the lead-up to the survey. My office had a group of around 20 volunteers knocking on doors, hosting street stalls, making calls and putting up posters. It was a small group, but each and every member displayed such a passion and enthusiasm for the task at hand. I would particularly like to acknowledge those people for whom the Yes campaign was their first experience of campaigning: Jacob, Robin, Michaela, Petra, Elora, Katrina, Hilda, Harriet and Cordelia. Thank you. I well recall campaigning in one shopping centre. We identified what we called the Nana factor, a succession of elderly who exhorted us that it was now time for marriage equality. And so that factor was proved time and time again in many electorates across Australia, with 133 electorates recording a positive response. This overwhelming positive outcome of the postal survey was a clear directive from the Australian people to their parliament: just get this done. There are those who seek to minimise and belittle the result. For example, some are claiming that less than 50% of eligible voters have supported a change in this legislation. I absolutely reject any such contention. The government made it clear that it was seeking to fulfil an election promise in introducing legislation to conduct a plebiscite. It indicated at that time that if the plebiscite was unable to be passed by the parliament, it would conduct this postal survey on the same principles. Whilst the survey did not require any enabling legislation, it is instructive to review the defeated bill to conduct the plebiscite. The 2016 bill was never expressed to require a majority of all enrolled voters. It is absolutely ridiculous and intellectually bankrupt, in my view, to claim that either the defeated plebiscite or this survey required a majority of eligible voters to support the proposition. Rather, in my view, it is significant that Australians have provided leadership to this parliament, leadership that the Prime Minister could not deliver on this issue. Those everyday Australians have told us loud and clear that they wanted to live in a country of fairness, of tolerance, of equal rights for all. Of the cohort who voted no, there were some who expressed their views by reference to their religious beliefs, without expressing any sense of intolerance towards the LGBTI community. I acknowledge and thank them for their representations to me and the courtesy in which they made those approaches, which were many both for and against the bill. Unfortunately, there were many who, in the name of religion, wished to revisit many of the anti-discrimination provisions introduced by each of the states and the Commonwealth over the last more than 20 years, and in particular seemed to argue for a return to the dark days when same-sex relationships were not acknowledged and had, in some cases, potential criminal consequences. My firm view is that if it is necessary and appropriate to provide for express freedoms, this legislation should not be amended so as to provide for those freedoms. As a number of people have already said in this place, as a matter of principle, piecemeal amendment of this legislation will do a disservice to both the LGBTI community but also to any religious seeking the protection associated with religious beliefs and religious rights. In my view, it is significant that there are already state-based and federally based anti-discrimination provisions, not only within anti-discrimination legislation but also within legislation like the Fair Work Act, which prohibits discrimination with respect to particular characteristics. Those characteristics include religious belief. This means that in most cases a person may not be the subject of discrimination with respect to a religious belief or religious practice. In contrast, there are express exemptions with respect to some discriminatory issues, in particular sexuality, which benefit those who claim a religious connection, such as a church or a school which is based upon religious free principles. I appreciate that during the survey many in the no case argued that freedom of speech with respect to the exercise of religion was already under a threat both here and overseas and would face a further threat if same-sex marriage was made lawful. My understanding is that many of the examples given of supposed consequences of same-sex marriage, particularly in the international context and in the context of a notorious case involving the Catholic Archbishop of Hobart, involved conflict between anti-discrimination provisions which benefit both those who are LGBTI and also those who are religious. Those arguments appear to me to be misconceived because they relate to the right of the LGBTI community to be free from discrimination, not the right to be married. There is no doubt that the LGBTI community deserves the right to live their lives free from discrimination, as do those who profess religious belief. I absolutely believe that it's possible to practice deeply held religious beliefs without in turn engaging in conduct which, for example from Section 17 of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act, offends, humiliates, intimidates, insults or ridicules another person. But as I've already said, parliaments have already decided that in certain limited cases those who profess a particular religious view shall be free, notwithstanding anti-discrimination law, to act in a discriminative manner with respect to employment of persons. I'm quite prepared to consider the outcome of the inquiry which is to be undertaken by Mr Ruddock. The irony of the right of politics seeking effectively the introduction of a Bill of Rights with respect to the exercise of religious freedom has already been identified by the member for Goldstein in several public statements. Deputy Speaker, I firmly believe that every family deserves the stability and recognition marriage confers, and that is why I stand here today in support of this legislation. I commend the bill to the House.